Alright, so let's take our project further. We have slight changes in our program. So right now we have a functional color generation app which is able to generate random color, and at the same time you can input your color manually and the color will be generated. The name of the color will be generated. So let's take a look at how it works. So if we say generate random color, each time we generate random color, you get to see the name of the generated color. Then you see the hexadecimal value. Once you keep generating, you keep seeing the value here as well. Now, another tricky part is we can input our value manually. So let's say I want a lighter gray. Once I generate, you can see that we have lighter gray. And if I want white color, you can just generate and you can see that we have white color. And you can, let's say I want to generate the color of the button, I can just say 00848F, then use the search button. So you can see we have the lagoon blue, the blue lagoon. Then we have the hexadecimal value as well. So it's very simple, and we have some basic function that allow us to do this. But our HTML, I've changed a little bit. If you look at what we did in the previous video, we had just one button, but right now we have multiple buttons. So another button was just added. Then if you want to get the updated version, just visit the GitHub Repo. You see the updated version. So you can just copy the HTML and update your code base. Okay, so let's dive into it. So if we check our program and refresh, you see that nothing is happening right now. Even when you generate, you see we still have the default values. So let's dive into it and see what we can create. The first thing we need to do, in our project folder, let's create a subfolder called JS. That's where we're going to save our JS. Now, the first thing we need to do before even writing any script, we need a plugin to help us to name our color. Ideally, JavaScript is supposed to help us with that, but unfortunately, JavaScript does not have any API to help us do that directly. So there's a good guy who has helped us to write some logic in order to generate these random names and just to match the color values. Thanks to Chirag, who wrote some line of code in order to help us generate this. So we're going to be using the plugin written by him, and the link is also in the project's repository. So let's just click. Let's try to open the link and see. So once you open the link, you can read all this information, but I just want the CDN document. Now I'm just going to copy this and create a file in our project for it. So in our JS file, we're just going to create a file and we can title the file ntc.js. We're just going to paste that into this. So this is all the preloaded color names that the program will be trying to merge. Okay, so we're good with that. The next file we need to create is our scripts.js, which we're going to declare our own JS logic and functions. Now that we have those two things, the next is we need to link it to our project. So we're just going to say script, then we have it in the JS folder. Let's link the NTC first. Then we also need to just do another one. Then let's link the JS folder, then our scripts. Okay, so to test if everything is fine, we can just come to our script. And say alert let's call the alert function and just call on the hello. So if we check our page, we should see hello. If we save it again and come back here, you can see hello. Right? So which means everything is fine. So now that we know that everything is okay, the next thing we need to do is to declare our function. Now, if you look at the functions we need to declare the colorGenerator function, then have our display function. After we declare these two functions, then we are going to also declare our event handlers, which are the two buttons. So we're going to target this button. Whenever we press or trigger any of these buttons, something should happen. Okay, it is a good practice. It is a good practice to leave comment in your code whenever you're programming. So let's start with that. It is a good practice to comment your code so that when you visit it again, you'll be able to understand what each of your function represents. So let's do that right now. The first function that we have is a colorGenerator function. So let's just write a comment and just say, so we know that this function is going to generate our color. So let's just declare it and call it colorGenerator. Then let's use our arrow function. Alright, so similar thing to the display function. So we're just going to duplicate it. So this is going to be our display function. We can also call it display color function. So let's just call it display color. Alright, so now we have the two functions. So let's deal with the first one. The first one, we need to pass in the parameter of color. So we want to check whether the user is giving the computer color value or the computer should generate color for the user. So for us to do that, we need to use the if statement. In using the if statement, we just need to say if color. So we're saying if there's a value here, let us call the display function and just pass in the color value. Then else, if there is no value, right, we want to generate random number. So let's just call our const. So this is constant variable random color. Then we are going to call our maths.flow maths.random. Then just multiply it by this value 16777215. So we want to set whatever value we get here to string of 16. Okay, so we now have our random number. So what we need to still do here is to call this display function. So we're just going to call the display function, display color, then pass in the random number. Yeah. So if you look at what's going on here, it's just if we have color value, we run this, pass in the color. If we don't, we generate a random color number and also display. Let's deal with the display function. Now for the display function, we need a variable. Let's call the variable name value. It's time for us to call this plugin that we attached initially. So for us to do that, we're just going to say ntc name, then we want to pass in the color. So we also need to pass in the color parameter here, because we are sending value into this function, so that we can target whatever value comes in here. So we have the color. What we need to do now that we have our value, so whatever comes from this function, whatever value comes, let us use it to display. So first thing we need to do is, let's even try to change. If we save it now and just go and refresh, nothing is happening yet. But let's try to change the background color. So for us to change the background color, let's just target the document.body. Then we want to target the style dot background color. Then we want to set the value to name value. Then let us have 0. Okay, so you might be wondering why it is 0. For us to see how the plugin works, let's say console.log. Then let's just pass in the name value. Alright, so now that we pass in the name value, let us call the function colorGen. Let us call this very function. So we just need to call it outside, because as it is, if we run it and check, nothing still happen. So we need to trigger this function. But this time around, we are just going to trigger it. Let's copy it without any value. So this is how to trigger a function in JavaScript. You can see that the color is already changing. So what we're doing is, we are calling this function to run, but there's no value here. So the function is generating random number. Then whenever it gets the random number, then we send the random number to the display function. Now the display function stores it and then store the color and then bring the value into this name value variable. Then we use this nc name plugin to get the color name. Now what we are doing is, we say console.log that we want to see the color value in our console. So if we inspect and go to console, we should see an array of all the possible value that we're getting. So you see that I use 0. 0 is for the hexadecimal color, 1 is for the name, and 2 is for the match, whether the color matches the name or not. So if you want to really understand that, I think you should read this documentation here. You really understand the example here. All right, so now that we are sure that everything is working, we just need to, so each time you refresh, you're going to see new color, because you're calling the colorGenerator function. The moment you remove this call, nothing happens anymore. So let's just undo so that we have it. Now the next thing is, we need to be able to set the input value, update the input value whenever the color changes. As it is, the value is not changing. So let's target the input. Remember, update was made on the HTML. All the ID are just set to camel case. That's small letter, then capital letter for the subsequent words. Alright, so let's target the input, which is the color input. So we're just going to copy the ID, then come back to script and just say color input dot value. I actually just realized that it is possible for you to use ID directly to target an element instead of using documents.getElement by ID and storing it in a variable. You can just declare it like this. So because we are dealing with input, we're just going to say input.value. So we want to update the value. Let's just copy this name and bring it here. Then this time around, we are still targeting the 0. So each time you can see the color, the value is updating. That works perfect. Then the next thing we need to target is the color name, which is this name. As you can see, we still have the default name. So the ID for that is color name. So let's just say color name dot inner HTML. So this is like to update the inner HTML, the content. So let's just copy the same value, but remember this time around we're going to be using the 1. Let's close this line. So you can see each time it's loading, it's changing. Cool. The next thing we want to target is the X value, this very value. So we're going to say X value. Then we want to update the X value. That's 0. You can see everything is working smoothly. So what's left now is our 2 buttons. Whenever they are clicked, we want something to happen. So let's check the ID for each of the buttons. So the first button is search color. So we want to, whenever the user input value here, we want to be able to search. Say for instance, I do DA. I think it's fine like that, and I search, something should be able to happen, but right now there's no event yet. So let's target the genSearch on our JavaScript. So we're just going to say that this time around we need to target, or let's just say events, button events. So we're just going to target the genSearch then add event listener. We're going to add event listener. Then we want on click. So whenever the user click the genSearch button, we want to add event listener. Then we want to run a function. So whenever the button is being clicked, we want to call this very function. So when we are calling it, we want to then grab the input value. So we can just even copy this one and just paste it inside. So let's try it out. Let's say we have DA. You can see the color is changing because we've tied the event to it. Let's say we want white. Okay, that's black. Let's say we want white. You can see that's white. But right now the random generator is not working yet. So similarly, let's just also duplicate this event handler, but let's check for the ID. So the ID is genBtn. genBtn, let's just call it genBtn. So, but this time around, we are not grabbing any value, just remove the value and we save. So, if we click, it should be changing. And if we update the value, let's say we want 0840, then F. You can see, let's say we want lighter gray. You can see we have lighter gray. Now we have an app that can tell the name of our colors. Then we have the hexadecimal value. So if you have any value anywhere and you want to know the name, you can just bring it to the app and search. Okay, one more thing. Let's see how we can make this viewable to anyone. If we can generate a link so that people can be able to see our app with GitHub Pages. So let's select the main and we're going to make it the root. Let's save it, and here we have a link. So let's try to load the link, even though I think it takes a little while for it to show. Yeah, and this is it. We have our color name generator and is available for anyone to visit. And let's see if everything works perfectly. If we refresh, let's say EEE, that's okay. And it works. All right, so if I check other browser, let's check Google Chrome with our new link, and here you have it. So even you can try it out. Just visit instinctup.github.io, then color name generator, and you'll be able to see this. All right, thank you for watching. So if you like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on all our social media handles to see more updates. Until next time, I'll see you in the next one.